Hi, everyone. I am David Lipton from The Reckoning, July 4th, 2030. Welcome to the 18th in our series of weekly podcasts. This episode tries to answer one question. Are we citizens of a nation committed to our republic or members of a tribe chained to identity politics? You're probably thinking, what a ridiculous question. Tribes are something out of the past before there were nations. They are pre-industrial groups of people composed of families, clans, and communities linked by blood ties, religion, dialect, and social relations established beyond living memory. Tribes are inward-looking. Tribal members look no further than their traditional ties to the people around them and the surrounding communities. Citizens, on the other hand, are members of nations that developed since the 17th century. While one religion usually dominated, a host of institutions, laws, and governing bodies regulated our social and legal relationships with each other. Citizens are outward-looking. Their reference point is to the larger political unit, like the state or the nation. Citizens have legal rights as well as obligations. While the citizen's default is to the law, the tribal member's default is to tradition. Okay, we are all citizens and not tribal members, right? Maybe? Think about it? Well, this requires much more thought. Consider the possibility that while society's technology and income levels may have changed over 2 millennia, people have not. Just like the hunter-gatherers of 10,000 years ago, we still seek out people like ourselves who share our values and practices. Let's turn to where we actually live. In 2008, Bill Bishop published a book called The Big Sort, where he noticed that like-minded Americans were separating themselves into very different communities with very different patterns of interacting with each other. Bishop did not call inhabitants of high or low-tech cities tribal members, but he did refer throughout the book to tribal/group psychology to distinguish one group from the other. He was particularly worried about how the Big Sort was tearing us apart as a nation. Does all this sound familiar to us? Bishop not only focused on how people acted in each of these cities, but how they differed in comparison to each other. Here is what I notice. First, the differences between the two groups are a matter of degree. For example, take church-going. People in both cities go to church, but church attendance is higher in low-tech cities while decreasing in high-tech cities. Second, community project involvement is higher in low-tech cities than it is in high-tech cities. And third, people in low-tech cities have more feelings of economic vulnerability when compared to people in high-tech cities. I urge my listeners to work through this list, perhaps even adding to it, and come to their own conclusions. There is much food for thought in these comparisons. To the issue of economic vulnerability, I referred to two articles published by U.S. News and World Report, published in May and in September of 2023. These articles listed and described the income levels of the 10 wealthiest and the 10 poorest cities in the United States. First, look at the list of the wealthiest cities. The 10 wealthiest cities in 2021 had a median household income ranging from $155,968 to $205,209. Notice that 7 of the 10 wealthy cities are in California. One is in Washington, one in Massachusetts, and the other in Maryland, respectively. All are on the left coasts. Second, let's look at the list of the poorest cities. The poorest cities in 2021 had median household incomes ranging from $32,217 to $37,734. Observe that the poorest cities are scattered across the interior of the United States. Also note that the most striking statistical difference between them, there is a 5 to 6 times income difference between the richest and poorest cities. Now let's have a look at the Real Clear Politics electoral map. While I am unable to say how these cities or indeed individuals in them voted, or how they will vote, I suggest we look at the Real Clear Politics map and then compare how the map shows the likely voting pattern of each state. Blue and shades of blue indicate the probability of voting Democrat, and the red and shades of red the probability of voting Republican. The gray states are toss-ups. Coincidence may not be causality, but I leave it to my listeners to draw their own conclusions. Perhaps some of you know people living in those cities or ones like them. Contact them and find out what they have to say. Ask them how they feel about what is going on in our country, and then compare the differences in their answers. It looks as though Bill Bishop's big thought, first documented 20 to 30 years ago, is with us and doing just fine. Where do these income statistics and voting patterns leave us? Are the Americans in these cities across our continent citizens of a nation or tribal members? Is it possible that we are both? Let's reflect on what historically has made an American citizen a citizen of this country. What are the values and principles underpinning our idea of citizenship? For most of our history, until about 20 years ago, our people believed in the American creed. The core of that creed was a commitment to the values of liberty, equality of opportunity, but not of results, individualism, a democratic process, rights of private property, and laissez-faire. These core values are embedded in the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, as well as in the operations of our state and federal governments. We accepted in principle and in practice the idea of accommodating differences through compromise to sustain a shared way of life. We all knew that different groups and classes of people had different priorities and lifestyles, but we accepted them and they accepted us. Many of us, though not all, either engaged or accepted the social practice of blending over time our diverse peoples through assimilation, integration, and intermarriage. We would not have thought of it in this way. We were just living the American motto of e pluribus unum. In our day, the ground has shifted to be replaced by tribal membership as happened in the 1850s and 1860s. The result was a bloody civil war. We are experiencing the disintegration of the idea and practice of e pluribus unum and replacing it with a population of inward-looking, self-focused collective groups. Amy Chua has written a striking book called Political Tribes. That was in 2018, with several ideas to overcome the political tribalism destroying our American creed. I would ask my listeners to look at the first page of Chapter 8 of her book and note the quotes by John Adams in 1780 and Ralph Ellison in 1952. Adams feared the division of the Republic into two great parties, and Ellison saw an America as many strands whose fate is to become one yet remain many. In fact, we are doing just that today. Meet the modern version of tribal membership. They are inward-looking groups of individuals, institutions, and organizations distinguished by their single-mindedness and isolation from others outside of their collective, be it ethnic, racial, or special interest. They are characterized by their isolation from and total disregard for anyone not one of us. While these groups have always existed, they accepted and practiced the larger idea of e pluribus unum. They saw themselves as part of a larger national community. Today, they do not. We are a society increasingly influenced and divided by a growing population who feel entitled to rights and privileges without responsibilities and have little to no collective civic sense and commitment to the American creed. What is to be done? I propose an answer, so stay tuned and in touch. In our next podcast, we will reveal the rising of a new political vision dedicated to the sustainability of our republic, the FCSLFD Coalition. If you enjoyed this podcast, Please subscribe to my channel and refer us to your friends and colleagues. You will hear from me, David Lipton, in a week's time. You can access my ideas and thoughts by visiting Amazon.com and search for my ebook, The Reckoning, July 4th, 2030.